Sam Roberts. I'm a member of the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescue Association, as well as one of the founding members of the Grassington Mines Appreciation Group. What I'm going to be doing today is it's a bit of a broad subject, really. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescue Association has done over the years in relation to mines rescue, because our organisation, whilst being a member of the Mountain Rescue Service, we're also affiliated to the Cave Rescue Service as well. And as part of that, we do conduct mines rescue operations. We have the kit to do it. It is somewhat similar to cave rescue, and we do get called out for these types of operations. So this is a presentation that I gave to UWFRA a couple of months ago now, just to give our members a little bit of an understanding of mines rescue, some of those that may not know that much about it, and the differences between that and cave rescue. And I'm also going to talk about the dangers of exploring mines, and I'm sure there's people who are tuned in right now that are probably a lot more experienced than I am. I have experience exploring around the Grassington mines and a few mines around our area, around Grassington area in North Yorkshire. But yeah, just my understanding of the dangers and going through things to look out for if you are venturing underground into these underground spaces. So a little bit about me, just to go a bit further. I've been a member of the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescue for around 6 years now. I've been involved in countless mountain rescue operations and pretty much every single underground rescue that we've conducted over that 6-year period. We're based out of Grassington in the Yorkshire Dales, and as I've said, we conduct, it's a voluntary service, as I'm sure you'll be aware. We conduct rescue operations from difficult and hard to reach places that the ambulance service and the fire service can't get to. The picture of me on the screen there, not my best picture, but gives a little bit of an understanding as to the sort of work that we do and the kit that I use to get down the mines. That's a mine shaft on Grassington Moor. And one thing I will mention is that nearly all of the underground picture, I think all but one underground picture on this presentation is from Grassington Moor, and these have been taken as part of my work with the Grassington Mines Appreciation Group. I said I'd be more than happy to present to Subbrit, given the fact that Subbrit has sponsored some of the work that we're doing. We are fencing off a number of incorrectly capped mine shafts on Grassington Moor. So we've raised some money and we're putting fences around them just to protect animals on the moor and members of the public who access it. And as you'll see going through the presentation, some of these shafts are not that easy to spot. So I'm just going to turn off my camera and move on with the presentation. Okay, so talking about the history of UWFRA's involvement with mines rescue, it was right from the start. So from July 1948, the beginning stages of the Fell Rescue Team, to the founding members, Len Huff and Ken Smallpage, they rescued a sheep. And that's one of the things that, in terms of mines rescues, this is one thing we get called out a lot for, is animals, dogs, sheep, things like that, falling down mine shafts, old lead mine shafts that have been left open. They conducted 2 rescues within 2 weeks, and within the next month, following another incident, I believe it was a missing person search, that formed the formation of the team. From looking at the book, the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescues book, there's 47 mines rescues undertaken by the team between 1949 and 1997, although there's been a few since then. The most recent being an incident in 2020 where 2 of our current members, Ian Geldad and John Helm, who may be tuned into this presentation right now, they rescued a sheep from a mine shaft just up on Grassington Moor, or just off Grassington Moor, actually. There was a major incident in February 1969 on Top Mere, that's above Kettlewell for those that are in the know. And that was rescue of a lad called Andrew Peel from a mine shaft, and it was 38 metres in depth. I'm going to come on to that in a second because to talk a little bit more about that. And the most recent mining death in the UK occurred in 2014. There's a very tragic incident which occurred in the Aberlast Slate mine. That rescue, it had 2 of our members involved there, 2 of our very, very expert specialised members trained in cave dive rescue, which are Rich Hudson and Adrian Hall, and they were involved in that rescue. The coroner was not able to determine the exact cause of death, but it was suspected that the levels in that mine contained carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. Again, I'm going to come on to that rescue in a second, and towards the end of the presentation, talk a little bit more about mine gases and what they can do to you. And they're not very nice, unfortunately. So, 1969, yeah, so the rescue above Kettlewell. Interestingly, with this rescue, if you just look on the left-hand image, I'm gonna draw on the screen. You just see there. Just goes to show how things used to be. Those sort of bars going across the top of the shaft there are just bits of Dexium which the team had for shelving that they used at the hut. So they needed something to brace across the shaft. Fortunately, this day and age, we have a lot more specialised kit. We're a lot better funded. But what happened here is this young lad, Andrew Peel, was walking across a snow-covered moor, and he climbed over the top of what he thought was an old shooting butt, because that's what they do with old mine shafts sometimes when they don't want to spend money on fencing. They'll put a little dry stone wall around it, but walkers can, climb over and try and take shelter in those sometimes. And what happened there is he fell straight through the hole there. I don't know if it was some bits of wood that were covering, or rotten sleepers or something like that. And apparently he fell a distance of 125 feet, which is in my terms 38 meters. Two of our members descended on wire ladders, and he was hauled to the surface in a stretcher. He did survive, but he ended up with a broken arm, broken shoulder blade, collapsed lung, and a fractured pelvis. So some very significant injuries. It's why we're very keen to get the shafts on Grassington Moor fenced off, because we don't want that to be happening any more frequently than it already does. This is an incident on Grassington Moor. So this was on the 13th of August 1982. Happened at Taylor's Shaft, which is one of only 3 shafts on Grassington Moor that are currently fenced off. The image on the right is of one of our members, John Helm, exploring the mine, although it wasn't as deep as is described in the newspaper clipping. So I think either it's been filled in or there's been a further collapse, which has meant that the shaft is not as deep as it once was. Apparently, it was 90 foot in depth when the rescue took place, or should I say the retrieval. When we explored it, it was probably only maybe 15 meters deep, something like that. And what happened here is 2 lads were walking across Grassington Moor. They came across this shaft. They thought, oh, that looks interesting to explore. So they drove back down to Skipton, bought themselves a tow rope, a 30-foot tow rope, which they then wrapped around one of the wooden sleepers at the top of the shaft. And one of the lads, he just lowered himself hand over hand down this 30-foot rope. And lo and behold, he gets to the bottom of the 30-foot rope, and there was another 60 foot to go. He's not strong enough to climb back up to the top of the shaft, and it resulted in him having to let go. So he fell the final 60 foot, and unfortunately that was to his death. The team were involved in that rescue. One of our very well-known rescuers. He's not part of the team anymore, but back in his day, he was an absolute legend. A guy called Ian Watson. He descended down to the bottom, confirmed that there was not much they could do for the lad, and he was put in a stretcher and hauled back to the surface. So another quite sad incident, and it just shows the dangers of these really deep holes that have since been left open and not correctly covered. And it does people exploring the shafts and not using the correct equipment. We've moved on a hell of a lot in the past few years with the introduction of SRT equipment, which some people may know. If you don't know what SRT is, that's single rope technique. It's where you use a length of semi-static rope, and you have equipment that allows you to descend and ascend on this one rope. It means you don't need to use wire ladders anymore, using less kit, and it's a lot more safer if you know what you're doing. But unfortunately, there are still people out there that aren't even aware of these specialist caving techniques or mine exploration techniques. And you see this lad here that got in contact with me through the Grassington Mines group. and he had been with his friend. I mean, he's referred to false floors as like fake floors, so he doesn't really know the terminology. I don't really think he knows what he's doing. He's used a piece of polyprop there, and though I can't see where it's connected to, I suspect he's probably just wrapped it around one of the wooden fence posts, which is obviously not a suitable anchor. And he's no idea coming down to, if you look at the right-hand image, he's no idea getting to the bottom of that, whether that's a false floor or anything. He's not clipped onto it to anything like that. And I don't even think he's probably considered about the lining of the shaft at the top, whether it was suitable to descend. Because when we're doing our work, sometimes if we identify a shaft, we'll initially throw a camera down there. So I'll lower a GoPro camera with a torch, lower it down the shaft, and I'll assess the shaft lining. If I consider it to be too dangerous to descend, then we won't bother. So you just see there's still people that are doing that sort of stuff. I give him some words of advice and said he needs to really maybe join a caving group and work on his skills first before he starts doing stuff like this. Unfortunately, I didn't hear anything back. So yeah, 2014, the Ablas Slate Mine, group of guys. These images here, I don't believe these are of the rescue. I think these are of the guys that were exploring the mine itself. This is over in North Wales. These guys were cave divers, mines exploration divers, underwater divers. And they were exploring the Ablas Slate Mine. They had gone through some underground passages, levels that had since flooded, since the pumps were switched off, because I'm sure, as people know, with most mines, unless you have an adit at the bottom which drains the water, you have to have pumps to pump the water out. When they get switched off, the mine fills up. So they were exploring this mine. They went through, opened out into a chamber with a drift, so an inclined drift heading away from them as they came out. And one of the guys decided to climb up this drift to see what was at the top. He only took a very, very small air canister with him. They knew there might be some bad air in that mine when they got out of the water, so they took a canister with them. And unfortunately, as he climbed to the top of this drift, I think it took a lot more effort than he thought it was going to do, getting out of the water. And unfortunately, he ran out of air. He took a breath of the air that was in the level, and unfortunately, it was full of an unknown gas. This caused him to tumble back down into the water. He started to convulse, and there was nothing more they could do for him. The divers he was with, they dived straight out, raised the alarm, and it was at that point that the specialist cave dive rescuers across the UK were notified. You know, you've heard of instances like the instance over in Thailand, the schoolboys that that had to be dived out. So they have the cave dive rescuers across the UK. They're a very specialist group of people, and two of our members, the rescue team, Rich Hudson and Adrian Hall, they were contacted, and they ended up it was quite an interesting. I heard Rich Hudson give a presentation on this. It was really, really interesting how he described how he was blue lighted by the police all the way up to Clapham, where an RAF helicopter was landed in a school field, and they then carried all their kit and they were flown all the way over to North Wales, and they dived through these passages, put this guy in a bag, and then were able to dive him out. But a very, very sad incident, but really does go to show how dangerous these places can be. So if you can see here, there's a Google Maps image just showing a small portion of the area that the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescue covers. The symbol of the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescue team, you can see there is over Grassington. That's where we're based out of. And that just goes to show the number of mines that are in our area. Each one of these little dots represents, well, it's a mining feature, but you can pretty much guarantee that every dot here is a mine shaft or a level. Mainly mine shafts because of the makeup of the topography of the ground. You can see the amount that's on Grassington Moor, and that's why we focus a lot of our work up there. It's very, very interesting. There's a lot to go at, which is why it's taken us so long to document where everything is. We start at the top. You've got places like Buckden Gavel Lead Mine. Again, I'm sure there's people here that have been down Buckden Gavel Lead Mine. It's a very interesting place to explore. I'm going to highlight it. Just, I know you can see, but I'm just going to highlight. But yeah, around this area, it's an interesting mine. You can go in via an adit entrance and explore the rest of the mine. Moving down around sort of the Kettlewell area, you've got Providence Pot, which forms part of the Darbygill Passage system, an infamous caving system where we get most of our cave rescue call-outs. But directly across from the entrance to Providence Pot on the side of Great Whernside are a number of mine shafts there. There's places like middle level, lower level, higher level around this area. They're still open. You can still get into them, but they are a little bit beginning to become a little bit unstable. Moving down to Grassington Moor, we, as I say, just absolutely saturated with mine shafts down here. And the deepest one that we've found so far is one called New Peru. That's 76 meters deep, really, really deep. You are not surviving a fall down that shaft. And moving down, we've got the Hebden area as well. There's quite a few down there. In Hebden, you have Hebden Gill. So there's mainly, rather than shafts, there's mainly adit entrances driven into Hebden Gill. That means where it's a passage driven from the side of a hill. So rather than a shaft from the surface, which is pretty much what every single mine on Grassington Moor was, you have these adit entrances driven into Hebden Gill. Interestingly, there's an adit called the Duke's Deep level in Hebden. That's a really, really interesting level. That it was a massive adit entrance driven into the side of Hebden Gill that runs all the way out. So if I'll try and do my best to draw it here, but basically it runs all the way from Hebden right the way across Grassington Moor, and all of the major mines on Grassington Moor all connected to this adit, which is what it was used for drainage. It was initially going to be used to bring boats of lead out of Galena out of the moor, but they realised that would be nonsensical, because to bring it out to Hebden, they then have to cart it back up to Grassington Moor to be smelted. So yeah, moving down to Greenhow, loads and loads of mines around this area. You've got places like the Black Hill level, a long level. That's another adit entrance that provides drainage, and there's actually been training practices undertaken by the Wharfedale Fell Rescue team here, practicing hauling and things like that. And yeah, and a number of other shafts over by Pateley Bridge, such as places like Sunside Shaft and the like. What's shown on here, was taken from the NMRS website. These are all non-ferrous mines, and they're all ferrous mines, and then you've got your non-ferrous here, mainly coal shafts. So you've got those shafts as well. So we'll get on to the dangers of these old shafts that still exist on the moor. This is a small example of the shafts on Grassington Moor, just to give people an idea of how dangerous these places can be, and to watch your footing whenever you are out for a walk. If you stumble onto an area that you think has been heavily mined, the two blue circles here, the one that I talked about before, Taylor's shaft, that is here. So that's the one where that young lad lost his life. The rest of the red circles shown across this image are shafts that have not been fenced properly. They've either not been fenced or not been fenced properly, and they range different capping methods. Some of them have wooden sleepers over the top. Some of them have mounds of spoil piled on top of the wooden sleepers, so you can't even see them. And some of them are left completely open, meaning that anybody can stumble down them, especially sheep, which is why we end up hauling sheep out quite a lot. And that's just a small section of Grassington Moor. So yeah, moving on to how to identify mine shafts. So I'm going to start, when I talk about the dangers of mines and mine shafts, I want to start from the surface. So those people that may not even venture underground, but when you're going out on your walks in the Dales and Peak District, places like that, what you want to be looking out for, what would indicate there might be a shaft, and what to avoid. The obvious places, like the image at the top left image, we have it's been worked on. This is Beaver engine shaft. This work was done by the AB Mines Research Group back in the 80s. They did this work. They capped the top of the shaft, and you know that's a shaft. You can look down it, you can see. Moving over to the far right hand image, You have this fenced off shaft that's been done by the local parks, I believe. You know, that's probably one of the better options. It's not very intrusive, but at least you can then see a shaft there, and it dissuades you from climbing over and stops animals from climbing. Then there's ones like the bottom image here. This is a shaft that they've just completely concreted over. Probably quite safe, although not ideal for us, because we want to explore these places. We want to preserve them. We want to see what's down there, you know, see if there's any artifacts that we can take images of. And when somebody comes along and concretes over the top, it then prevents us access. One thing that you see quite a lot of, and they are quite dangerous, are these beehive mounds on the bottom left image. What they'll do is they pile stones up in a beehive formation over the top of the shaft. Unfortunately, what that results in, well, firstly, over time they deteriorate, rocks fall out, and then they begin to collapse, and they slump lower and lower at the pot, and then at one point it all falls in, leaving a completely open shaft. And the second thing is people want to have a look down them because they might hear running water, so they will like lean onto the rocks. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that's extremely dangerous because the extra weight can cause the rocks to shift, which can then cause the whole thing to fall in. Another easy to identify in the summer, but not so much in the winter, is a shaft here. Now, some people might not even notice that this is a shaft, but what these are rotten sleepers, railway sleepers, and they are rotten because they've been exposed to the elements for the past 60 years. Covering a shaft. This is New Peru, so this is the deepest shaft on Grassington Moor. And I mean, I don't know what the conversion is from 76 meters to feet, but it's a hell of a long way. I've been to the bottom of it. It feels like a long way. I was exhausted ascending back out of it, just so it shows you how deep it really is. And in the winter, when it snows, you know, it'll cover these sleepers, and you won't have a clue. If you're walking across the moor and you step on top of these sleepers, you're going straight through. It's a miracle that nobody has fallen through here. So this is one of the ones that we are going to fence. But bottom right hand image, even more dangerous. You probably think this is just an image of the moor. What you can see in front of you here is a shaft. What you'll see in the background is a horsewhim. Now that's been rebuilt again by the Beehive Mines Research Group. Just to show what horsewhim, I'm going to come on to horsewhims in a minute so you know what to look for. But here in the bottom right hand of the image, I'm going to try and circle it. That is a shaft. That's a shaft with railway sleepers across the top, and then a mound of earth piled on top of it. And countless people walk over this, and one day it's not going to hold. So that's something these are the things to be aware of when you're walking across the moor. Horsewhims, you know, look out for them. These are really good identifiers of mine shafts. If you see a horsewhim, so on the left-hand image, here's the whim, and in front of it, that is the shaft. Look on the right-hand image. This is a Google Earth image, and there's a horsewhim from the top. This is Richard's shaft, which we're currently doing some work at because I'm just going to circle the horsewhim. And the shaft is just here, and we're just in the process of fencing that at the moment. Been down that shaft the other day, but it's not suitable to explore properly. Although there isn't a lot to look at the bottom because it ends in a bit of a chamber, but the bottom of the lining is not so great. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, about shaft linings and when to sort of avoid them. But yeah, so I came straight out of that mine because it wasn't safe. To give people a better understanding of how the mines formed, these are sort of earlier mines. These are what mines would start off as. You know, they'd start off by just working at the veins as they outcropped on the surface, but as time went on and the veins were a little bit harder to get to, they would work on bell pits. They would dig bell pits. Both of these are bell pits. The image on the right-hand side is of a windlass, or as it says on this image, a bucket and chain. So they would haul buckets in and out. And then as time went on and the shafts got deeper and they wanted the buckets to be heavier, they would use horses to pull out. And from there, they used engines in the form of horsewhims. So I know people might think of an engine as in like a machine, as in like something powered by diesel or petrol, but in reality, an engine can be a horse turning around in in a circle, or a water wheel or something like that. This is something that I talked with the rescue team about. I wanted them to understand a bit more about the terminology that we may use when talking about going down a mine and alternatives that we may have. So let's say somebody falls down the main engine shaft, as you can see on here. I've just gone straight over the title there. The main engine shaft, as you can see there. There may be another way into that mine. There may be an adit entrance, as can be seen down on the bottom right. There may be another way to get into it. That may have been used to drain the mine, like what you saw on Grassington Moor with the Duke's deep level that drains the rest of the mines. Unfortunately, that's collapsed. You can go in quite a fair way at the moment, but it does collapse part way down. So here you have the main engine shaft, and what I've tried to draw at the top is what you would call the collar. So it's a dry stone, or I think down south they refer to it as gingin or gingin. This is where they would be digging through loose shale rather than hitting the main solid rock, limestone rock or gritstone down at the bottom here. To avoid the shale from collapsing in, they would build dry stone walling collar right to the surface. So again, you've got the main engine shaft here. That'll be what we used to draw the spoil out. And generally, the men would access the mine by manways. So the manway shafts here are made up by split sections of passages and then shafts. And I think that was to give them a bit of a break rather than trying to climb down straight down the shaft. Keeps them away from the main engine shaft, meaning that material can be brought in and out without having to stop for the men to get in. Underground, you have levels that are run off from the main engine shaft here, and you have things called sumps. That doesn't mean, and this is especially important for the people that are cavers. You know, if I say sump to a caver, he'll think that's the end of the cave where we will reach the water level where a cave diver may go in. That's not always the case with a mine. If I say sump, it could just mean that there's a further shaft that's driven downwards from a level. It may just, a lot of them, you'll see a lot of times, good examples are in places like Buckden Gavel Lead Mine, where you'll have a level and then a sump that may go down, 5 meters and just end into nothingness, where they chased a vein of ore downwards, chased a vein of galena down, and then it petered out and they stopped. And again, going up, same thing. They would have things called rise, and then maybe drive a level from the top of there. The miners preferred these because it's easier to chip away at the roof and knock the spoil down below you than it is to dig it out and then have to lift it up out the sump, as I'm sure you can imagine. And again, you're just the headgear, so that's what you will see at very many preserved coal mining sites like the National Coal Mining Museum. They've still got a headgear erected there, and that's what we refer to when we say the headgear. You won't see any headgear left on these small mines in around Grassington area and places like that, because these were small ventures and the wood was probably reused for other things when the mines were stopped, rather than like coal mines that were more worked in like this, from the 1910s to the 1980s. So yeah, two types of makeup of shaft lining here. Both use dry stone walling, but as can be seen in the right-hand image, this is the one. These are the ones that we prefer, where you have the dry stone walling that drops down and then just melds straight into the solid rock. If you look on that bottom right-hand image, can you see how the dry stone walling just melds seamlessly into the rock, and that's a lot safer. You don't have to worry about it collapsing. Well, obviously anything can collapse, but it's less likely to. Then you've got the one on the left-hand side. Now, what's going on here is, and this is like a lot of mine shafts, and this is why most of them have collapsed, especially on Grassington Moor. What they did is they built a wooden foundation ring, a wooden collar at the bottom here. And then they would build up from that, and they would build this dry stone walling. Now, what's happened over the years, bearing in mind, if I can say for the Grassington Moor lead mines, I think work stopped in, I think it was 1892. I think it is. Work stopped in 1892, so they've just been left derelict for all these years, and the wood has since rotted away. We've got one image here of the bottom of shaft with the wooden collar that's come away. This is one of the only images I've taken of this, for obvious reasons. It was quite nerve-wracking taking that picture. You can see here, this is where the collar would have sat, and the dry stone walling sat on top of that. And all that's happened since then is the rocks are just pressing against one another. But I could quite easily, if I got a lump hammer and started to knock those stones out there at the bottom, those deads as they're referred to, that whole thing could come collapsing in on me and bring a couple of 100 tons of rock down on top. So if if anybody ever does come across, if you ever do go down shafts like this, I would severely discourage you from exploring any mine that has a shaft that looks like the left-hand image. I would come straight back out and say that exploring these underground mines, it's not worth your life. It might be, interesting, but it's certainly not worth your life. Roof protection. I'm sure everybody's seen pictures of old mines, and they see these big old timbers holding up the roof. This image to the bottom left-hand side, that's the only image underground that I've used from somewhere else. This is not from Grassington. I don't know where this is from. That looks pretty secure. There's some really big iron supports, steel supports going across the top of here and holding the roof up. So it looks really, really safe, nice and beefy. This is what you're more likely to get around our areas, around Grassington. These old wooden logs that are holding, roofs up or false floors. And on the right hand side here, this one on the right is taken from New Peru. That's the mine I mentioned earlier. That's at about 50 meters depth. So yeah, and these begin to rot. You can see a lot of them are really, really rotten. You really, really have to watch when you're moving past these. If you're going through water, as you can see, the Explorer on the top right hand image is doing there. As you're working past these, try not to disturb the water too much. Again, you've really got to weigh it up. Is it worth me continuing, or should I just come straight out? Is it worth me risking my life? Another thing they did, this is Duke's level on the bottom right hand of the image. This is really interesting. Although further down this passage, the wall has actually begun to collapse away, so we had to be very careful passing through there. But what they've done there is they've created this beautiful arching that is holding the roof up, and that, as I'm sure you can imagine, that's a hell of a lot better than using timbers, because the timbers will rot away, whereas those rocks will last a lot longer. False floors. This image on the left-hand side, that image was taken from below a false floor where I was looking up towards it. And just look at the absolute state of the bits of wood there holding up God knows how much weight. So I was very, very cautious around all that. That's what they look like, basically. So false floors, the way they would do it, they would dig out what's referred to as a stoping. That's where they take out a large amount of rock in sort of the vertical axes. So they might not go left and right very far, but they'll go up and down. And in order to access the higher reaches, they'll put sort of stemples in, and they may create multiple floors. You'll see this a lot in Coniston. So Coniston copper mines, that's where you'll see a lot of that. And they always talk about in Coniston. That's why a lot of the passages in Coniston, you'll see traverse lines bolted to the side of the wall, even though it's just a straight floor. It's because that floor may at some point give way, and you're not going to go plummeting 100 meters. So again, these are that on the left hand side, you've got a false floor there, and on the right, that's just showing the top of one. And you can imagine if I wasn't showing you the bottom of the image where you could see the stemple across, you might, if you could sort of only see this part of the image, you might think that floor is perfect to walk across and think, oh, it's absolutely fine. We're on, we've hit the bottom of the floor. And if I talk back to that image that young lad sent to me, the one where he'd gone down on that polyprop rope and hit the floor, that looks very similar. He doesn't know if that's a false floor beneath his feet there. So that's something to really look out for. You're only really going to know if there's one there by having a good understanding of the mine itself, or even, I know I've seen videos of some people drilling through the floor to see how thick the floor is. They bring along a drill, STS drill, big long drill bit, and then they drill through the floor to see if they hit something or not. If it starts to get very loose, then they know they're straight through a false floor. I talked about stemples. So yeah, when they take out a stope, when you've got an open stope, which can be seen here, the miners would sometimes use stemples, which are pieces of wood that they would wedge across the opening, and then they could stand on these and work at higher levels. It was dangerous enough when they were doing it, but nowadays these bits of wood have rotted away and they're not safe at all to climb on. So if you ever was to go into a mine, you saw some stemples going upwards, I wouldn't advise climbing on them. You'd need to think of another method of getting up. Another thing that we see a hell of a lot in Grassington is stacked deads. For those that may not know, deads are the material that's removed from a mine that doesn't contain any valuable ore. So just bits of rock that they blasted out and they need rid of. They obviously didn't want to carry this to the surface. They wanted to leave as much in there as possible. This is why certain shafts that were wasted, or they got everything out that they needed to, they would fill these shafts back up with deads rather than have to carry it to the surface, because it takes time and they don't want to be doing that. They want to be only really spending time removing the ore. What they've done here, interestingly, this on the left-hand image, they've put some stemples. They've opened up this stope here, and then they've put some stemples across from either side of the passage, and they just stacked deads on top of that. It saved them, a couple of bucketfuls there that they would have had to carry to the surface. Bearing in mind that passage there is a couple of 100 meters from the main engine shaft as well, so they'd have had to carry it to the engine shaft before a horse could have been used to haul it, or a water wheel could have been used to haul it to the surface. On the right here, so both these are images of myself actually. So you can see as I'm climbing down this is a sump, what I talked about a few minutes ago. On the right hand image, I'm climbing down this sump, and to my right hand shoulder are stacked deads. Not very obvious on this picture. I'm being I know it doesn't look here, but I'm being very, very cautious to not touch these. And I'm not making any loud noises as the guy who's taking a picture of me at the top. I'm being very cautious to drop myself down and see if there's anything to see at the bottom. Before I move on, the next, in fact, I will move on to the next one. The next slide that I'm going to talk about, this is a video that I'm going to bring up to give those of you a bit of an understanding of what it's like to experience a collapse underground and how scary it can be. And it's why you really need to respect these underground spaces. I have been involved in a couple of collapses when we've been digging and things like that, and it is absolutely awful. It feels like the world's coming down on your head. You get that feeling, that pit of your stomach, dread feeling. It's absolutely awful. And it's why you just have to be really, really careful. And I certainly learned from it. The image that, the video that I'm going to show you now, I don't know where it's from. It's potentially Peru. I did read that somewhere. They're digging really bad. It might be a drift mine or something like that, or even just a level driven underground. But this is a massive level that's been driven. It's a recent video, and they haven't used the correct form of method to hold the roof up. And I won't go into the intricacies of the different ways of mining in the sort of, in later years, mainly because I don't know a lot about it, but you'll just see here what happens when they do it wrong. So yeah, very, very scary. The video continues a little bit after that, and the light goes out, the one that you can see there. So God knows what the guys under there must have thought. I don't know why he wasn't running away. I don't know what was going on there, but it looked like it was expected anyway. So yeah, mine gases, something you really, really need to be aware of if you ever decide to explore mines, or even just any underground space, really. This is why whenever we go underground, we take gas detectors. And we have them on us just to make sure before we drop down a shaft, we always drop the gas detector first to make sure the gas isn't sitting low. And as I'll come into in a second, a couple of gases you'll find heavier than air, so they'll sump at the bottom of shafts. And there have been incidents, especially in caves, where even our organisation, the Wharfedale Fell Rescue, we have had rescues where guys have been doing blasting down the bottom of caves. They've then descended back down to check on the progress of the dig where they've been doing the blasting, and they've been overcome by gas that's sat at the bottom of the shaft, and then we've had to go in and unfortunately recover them. So yeah, the sort of miners terms for these gases are fire damp, white damp, black damp, stink damp, and what makes up these sort of types of gases, the main components of them is what we're trying to say. You have fire damp, which is methane; white damp is monoxide, sorry; black damp, carbon dioxide; and stink damp, hydrogen sulfide. I'm going to come on to those one by one. So, carbon dioxide, you see, so those of you that may have some medical experience, everybody knows that air is made up 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and 1% other gases. 0.03% of air is carbon dioxide. And as I've just said then, it's the main component of what's referred to as black damp. And it's caused by the biological oxidization of rotting timbers. And it can build up due to respiration as well. So when I say biological oxidization, I mean when timbers rot underground. So when they've been in there a long time. Not that big of a deal if there's not that many timbers. But if you've got a mine, good examples are the ones you'll see in America, because in America they tend to timber like the whole mine. It seems to they're like really, really heavily timbered, whereas in our mines they're only really timber sort of sections that are a little bit unstable. And it can also build up due to respiration as well. That's another thing to think about. When you're breathing out air, you're breathing out carbon dioxide as well, so you can get that build up. It's colourless, odourless, and heavier than air. So it will sit at the bottom of shafts or the lower parts of passages. At 5% CO2, you'll experience stimulated respiration, and at 7 to 10, you will result in unconsciousness after a few minutes of exposure. And it can be mistaken for fatigue. So if you find yourself underground beginning to yawn quite a lot, it might not be that you're tired. It might actually be that there's a buildup of carbon dioxide, and you're not going to know. That's why you need a detector that's going to tell you if the oxygen level has dropped. It will also cause a feeling of anxiety as well. So if you are going in and you start to feel really anxious, and what happens is carbon dioxide will cause increased respiration. That's what tells your body to breathe. So a build of carbon dioxide, you'll start to breathe a lot faster. And you'll see, I've just mentioned there, experience stimulated respiration. That's what I'm talking about. You'll find yourself breathing really quick. That could be a buildup of carbon dioxide. Here I have a video. This is my video that we took exploring a mine over by, where was it now? So Dale area, Greenhow area. This is a video just showing a drop in oxygen. It's not too bad. It only drops down to about 14%. But listen to how laboured my breathing is. We haven't really been doing that much. We've only been walking along a quite easy passage. So, and I'm fairly fit myself, so I shouldn't be as out of breath as I am. It just shows you here that that's because of the lack of oxygen that's in the air. I'll just try and bring that up now. Okay, so we're exploring wonderful level at the moment using the new gas detector that we've got. Really, really good that we have this. So as we've started entering the level, it was all right at the start, but we've got maybe 150 metres into the mine level, and the oxygen level's just dropping and dropping, keeping it held out in front of us so it doesn't get confused with what we're breathing out. But right now, where I am here, we're at 15%. And now we're not willing to go any further. You can get away with, from what I've heard, down to about 11, but that's really dangerous. We will not go any more than 15%. So unfortunately there is a fair bit to go out there.
It seems like there's loads to look at, but unfortunately we're not going any further than this because it's just going to keep getting lower and lower. Just goes to show, just because you have water coming out of the mine that you thought might be, dragging air with it, doesn't mean to say there's any air further in. Fortunately, there's nothing else. There's no H2S or methane or carbon monoxide. But because none of those are flashing up, but the oxygen level's dropping, it must be carbon dioxide. And you can really feel, we're all right, and we have just been walking, so that might be it, but our breathing is a bit laboured. It is quite hard to breathe. So you have to watch that, and I'm constantly keeping an eye on that to make sure that it isn't dropping any further. We're going to make our way out now and back to the surface.
Yeah, so carbon monoxide. You'll know about this if you have a coal fire or something like that, or wood burner in your house. You need a carbon monoxide detector because it can come off from combustion of coal, things like that, and from wood. As you can see on the screen there, it results from the incomplete combustion of organic-based materials, as well as the product of detonated explosives and diesel engines. It also occurs in large quantities during the oxidization of coal. So, oxidization of coal, when coal is getting cut out, when they're digging through, these coal mines, when the coal's exposed to the air, it can get released then. Less, we don't really have coal mines in this country anymore. And even if they did, they have their own mines rescue teams. But for the mines that we go in, you need to think about, there are guys out there using explosives and things like that. Some people even may use engines underground, generators, where they may not have the correct ventilation, and it may have built up in an area, and that's called overcome them. And then the rescue team has had a call out, or for yourselves, if anybody is doing digging activities, it's something to be aware of. When explosives are detonated, they give off various gases. It's highly toxic, reduces the blood's ability to carry oxygen through the body. Not going to go any further into that. You can get really complex with it. All you need to know is that it can cause you to die. It's flammable, tasteless, colourless, odourless, and it's lighter than air, so you won't see it, you won't know it's there until you start to breathe it in and probably start getting a headache. But it is flammable as well, so it's something to bear in mind depending on what you're doing. The ppm there, if you don't know, it means parts per million, so in very low quantities, 200 parts per million, so 200 parts of this per million parts of air. It causes dizziness, headache, and nausea. High quantities, like 6,400 parts per million, it'll cause death within 10 to 15 minutes. And that's why you have to keep those sort of detectors in your house, just in case you have a leak in your fire and it's letting gas out. And it's the main component of what's referred to as afterdamp, or as I talked about a few seconds ago, fire damp. Again, yeah, just you need to be aware if you're going in and someone's been doing some blasting. Methane you've probably heard about if you know anything about coal mines. It's found in coal seams and shale deposits. It's the main component of natural gas. Again, colourless, odourless, tasteless, extremely flammable, and lighter than air. And it's the main component of what's referred to as fire damp. So, sorry, I mentioned fire damp on monoxide, didn't I? I do apologise. It's not fire damp, it's after damp. Methane, yes, so fire damp, that's what methane is referred to as. The explosive range, it's between 4% and 16%. That's called the LEL and UEL. I used to know a lot about this because in my old job, I was trained in understanding working with electrics in explosive atmospheres. And I know quite a little bit about this, but basically you've got the lower explosive limit and the upper explosive limit. When the concentration of a certain explosive gas is so high, it actually won't ignite because there isn't enough oxygen in the air to ignite that gas. So above 16%, it won't ignite. But that 4 to 16 is the explosive range, so very dangerous at that range. It can cause asphyxiation in higher concentrations due to the displacement of oxygen, and it causes headaches and nausea. If you're going anywhere where there may be methane present, like an old coal mine, you really need to think about the specialist equipment that you'd need. In the past, so if we go back, in the olden days, and I'm talking a long, long time ago, in the 18th, 19th centuries, they used to have miners known as firemen, and this was a really dangerous job what they do is they would hold a candle on a long pole towards the roof of the level, because the methane would I think I've said there, lighter than air. So it would sit at the top of a level. And what they would do is they'd go down and he'd lie on the floor and he'd hold this pole out with the candle on the end of it. He would cover himself with like a wet blanket to protect himself, and then he would set off the methane to get rid of it. That would be the beginning shift. Let's get rid of it, and then we can start mining. Very, very dangerous job. A lot of people used to die doing it. So very, very dangerous. One thing to think about, there'll be people here, I imagine, that do underground stuff, and they'll be aware that if they have petrol torches, if you look on the back of your petrol torch, if you're sad like me and you look at these sort of stuff, I'm just showing you two here. Here's the right hand side image is my let me turn my drawing back on. Right hand side image is my backup caving torch, and the left hand image is a torch I used to use at my old workplace. On the back, it gives a readout, and it will say EX next to it, and that means it's suitable for use in certain explosive atmospheres. But what I want to say to people is, just because your kit says EX on it does not mean it's suitable for areas with methane. You need to consult somebody that knows how to read the symbols on the back, and you can see how many there are. There's a couple of lines worth, all of different little symbols that mean different things to people that know how to read them. And they not always can be used in certain places. You have to use specialist kit in certain areas. The one on the left, this torchlight, this is pretty much the highest level of protection you can get, where the torch doesn't produce enough power that would ignite methane. So you could use that torch in a methane environment. So yeah, certainly your standard caving headlamps that you're buying, they're not suitable for explosive gas atmospheres. Hydrogen sulfide, another really dangerous gas. It is suspected, but not proved, that the Aberlas incident in 2014, this was the cause of that guy's death, was hydrogen sulfide. It's produced from the decay of organic materials, and is found naturally in many mine sites where water reacts with minerals in the rock. What I mean by the decay of organic materials, I mean sort of human waste and things like that, which is why you do get buildups of this in sewers. And it's one of the reasons why we have the, it's gone right out of my head, but basically, we're out of your sink, you have that, the pipe where it's bent round, the U-bend, that's it, the U-bend in your pipes, and it's filled with water. That's to stop gas, hydrogen sulfide, coming out of the sewers and coming out and into your bathroom. That's one of the reasons why it's done. It does smell like rotten eggs, which is why it's referred to as stink damp, and it's highly poisonous, flammable, and heavier than air. It initially causes eye irritation, tightness of the chest, but prolonged exposure will cause unconsciousness and death. Now I've mentioned that it smells like rotten eggs. However, I need to mention that at relatively low concentrations, it loses its smell, and it's a process called, and I'll try and say this correctly, the olfactory paralysis. That's basically where it paralyzes your sense of smell in your nose, and you won't be able to smell it anymore. You might, if it's in really high concentrations, you might get like an initial quick smell of rotten eggs, but then it will go immediately, because the concentration is so high that it paralyzes your nerves in your nose. Heavier than air, so it's going to sit low. It's going to sit, So if you're another one to really, really look out for, if you were descending down a shaft, you'd want your gas detector lower than you, so that if it did detect hydrogen sulfide, then the gas detector would alarm, and you'd know not to descend any further. At 50 to 100 parts per million, which is really low, it will lead to eye damage. At 100 to 150 parts per million, the olfactory nerve is paralyzed after a few inhalations, and your sense of smell disappears. And at 800 parts per million, it can lead to death after 5 minutes of exposure. At 1,000 parts per minute, will cause immediate collapse and death even after a single breath. Another gas that I'm going to just touch upon a little bit, I don't know a great deal about radon gas, so I'm going to put that out there to start with. This is from my research, but basically, as what you can see on the screen there, the air in most caves and mines, it contains various concentrations of the radioactive gas radon. You may have heard of that if you're a caver or even mine explorer, and it's formed mainly by the radioactive decay of uranium. You'll find this in like working mines and caves, but because of the forced ventilation, that will move it out. So forced ventilation can get rid of it. From my reading from the notes from the British Caving Association, though, however, it says there's no indisputable proof that cavers' health has been adversely affected by radon during caving activities. Furthermore, tests have shown that the caves in the Yorkshire Dales contain less radon than most other caving areas in the UK, and they're not aware of any information to suggest that there's a high death rate from lung cancer and more amongst elderly or retired cavers. So basically, radon gas can cause cancer. You can just see there, basically, it's unlikely that it's going to cause an issue to rescuers and underground explorers. However, you do need to think about that. If the cave or mine that you're going into is known for having high concentrations of radon, you might want to just wait until like winter months, because it tends to drop in winter months rather than the summer. And you really, if you're not doing that much underground exploration, you don't need to worry. If you're going underground every single day, then you really need to sort of have a look at the BCA's advice on limiting exposure to radon. So yeah, just to sum up, really, I think I've made it quite clear that mines are extremely hazardous environments. There are a lot of hidden dangers that are not apparent. Unlike the limestone found in caves, the rock can be much weaker and unstable. And gardening, if anybody knows what that word means, when you go down a mine or a cave and you're trying to clear up the place to make it, you might be going off the side of a pitch or a shaft at the end of a level. You don't want to be knocking stuff down and going, I'll just clear this out of the way, because you might make it worse. If you go and knock a load of bits of wood out of the way, you might bring the roof down on you. So you don't really want to do any sort of gardening. Try and stay away from anything that's in situ. Mainly for rescue teams, this is something I said to my team when you're thinking about rescue hauls, because we need to think about this. But also for exploration as well, if you're installing hangars and stuff like that. A hanger might not always be the best thing. I've had this issue. Trying to install hangers into shale does not work. You need to think about something else, because it just won't grip. If you're putting a hanger in, which is what, for those that may not know, I'm going to dumb it down a little bit. If a hanger is where you can attach a carabiner to it and then clip your rope to it, and you can create an anchor point to be able to descend a shaft. A hanger might not be suitable to go into shale. It'll go into limestone, fine, but it might not go into shale. You might have to think about other methods, like putting, we in the rescue team use stemples, but not the sort of stemples I've talked about a few minutes ago. We use stemples that can be braced across the big metal beefy things that we can sort of twist on a buttress thread out, and it will push into the sides of the wall and give a really strong anchor point. We can do things like that. Lots of mines use forced ventilation, especially these bigger old, coal mines that you saw. They use large fans in order to displace dangerous gases. I could talk all day about the various ways in which gases were removed from mines. They had these little fans that young boys would operate to drive air down the mines, and they also used things called water blasts, where they would divert water down pipes and it would drag air with it. But as I say, all these have now been removed in these old mines. So if you are going down these old disused mines, you really need to think about, well, hang on, there might be a buildup of gas here that when the mine was in operation would have been removed, but now it's still there. Coal mines are extremely dangerous, and I wouldn't advise anybody going in and exploring them, not the ones that you see, in later years, because they weren't made to last. They used methods where they would take out a portion of, they take out what they needed, and then they would allow the roof to collapse in, on these advancing or retreating faces. And I wouldn't advise anybody going down. If we did have to go and do a rescue down there, we'd have to really consider about the kit we were taking in. And just to say, really, thank you for everybody for listening. I hope you found it, relatively interesting. Again, as I say, I'm not an expert. I've just tried to provide what I know about exploring these mines and what I've learned, and also what I've learned from being within a rescue team that does undertake these sorts of rescues, albeit, 99.9% of our underground rescues are caves, because caves are a lot more explored. People do a lot of caving, whereas mines exploration is quite niche. And yeah, if anybody was interested in joining the Grassington Mines Appreciation Group, you are more than welcome to. It doesn't cost anything to join. Have a look on the Facebook page, or have a look on our on grassingtonmines.com if you're interested in learning about the Grassington Mines. There's a lot of information on there, and there's also videos of the exploration that we've undertaken, including the mine that you can see directly in front of you, which is Chatsworth Mine. That's an interesting mine to explore, but again, it requires the correct kit to go down there, and these places are not like caves. They're not massively safe. Yeah, so thank you very much. I'm going to put my camera back on, and yeah, I'll bring up the chat back up and see if anybody has any questions that might want to ask. I can see there's quite a lot there, so I'll go through the chat first to make sure I've not missed anybody. So I can't see anything on the.
No, any questions? I've moved on to the Q&A.
Oh, cheers, Tony. Thank you, mate. Right. Let's have a look. So I seem to recall reading a rescue happened in the UK where BA sets were used underwater as the mine was flooded. So yeah, I mean that'll be. I imagine that's the Abelas rescue. Yeah, underwater. Well, they use diving cylinders. Like what if you know anything about cave diving, you ever heard of cave divers? That's who got brought in, basically, cave divers. That's what they use. So yeah, they've done it there, and they've done it a few places. We've had one. Sleetskill was another one. Right. Sorry, bear with me. It does seem to keep moving. Have you deleted that message?
Yeah, I'm deleting them as you answer them.
Oh, perfect. Cheers, Tony. My eyes were funny then. Are there any official mines rescue stations left? Yeah. So, as there were for the working mines, yeah, really interesting. I only learned this from researching this presentation. There is the MRS, the Mines Rescue Service. It's crazy to think that back in the past, nearly every single group of mines had a mines rescue station. Really high trained guys. It was really interesting. They even had buildings. Where I grew up, there was a building, a mines rescue station just down the road. Obviously not in operation when I grew up. Nowadays, there's just one organisation that does mines rescue across the UK. And to be honest with you, I don't even think they do any rescues in reality. They are more for training, for confined space training. They've diversified because they're trying to stay relevant. So they are a mines rescue service, but they really just a training organisation now. Oh, right, there's a mines rescue station at Hartley, County Durham. Yes, so there might be one there. I was only aware of that mines rescue service, and I don't think they're in County Durham. I think they're down south somewhere. I think they might be near Sheffield. Apart from yourself, what warnings are given to this? Not used to the area. So on Grassington Moor, I'll just give Grassington Moor as an example. This is why we're trying to make it a bit better. There are signs up at the entrance to the moor saying stay on the paths, don't venture off the paths. There are open mine shafts, and that's what you'll see pretty much everywhere on the Peak District and places like that. Around Coniston as well. If you go up to Coniston or the Lake District, you'll see that. But really, putting one sign at an entrance to an entire moorland is not ideal. It's why, really, I think there should be a little bit more focus and a bit of money given, essentially by the government, to make these places a bit safer, even if it's just a fence. But the fences that are looked after, so like the fences that we're putting up, we're putting up 15 fences on Grassington Moor, and we will monitor those fences. So anytime that they get degraded, bits need replacing, we will do it. We're happy to do it. You see a lot of ones that a fence goes up 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and never gets looked at again. What's for a tiny pocket barrier? Ridge shelter monitored showed low O2 and got ill very rapidly. Needed to surface for air. Shows how even with decades of experience and all the right kit, risk assessment qualification, you can still hit problems. Exactly, the really, really dangerous places. And it's a good job you had a meter there, or you're relying on your own senses. And in high concentrations, you might not even notice. It can be one breath, as I said before, like that lad in the Abeless Slate mine, one breath and you're gone. What gas detectors? We use the Q-Ray 2 gas detectors, Q and then RAE gas detectors. They're really good. I like them, they're pretty simple. There are different types of gas detector. The ones I used to use in my old place of work, that was a forced, I forget the name of it, but basically it's like a forced air gas detector. It had a little pump inside it and it would consistently draw air through it. They're a lot more accurate and they react quicker. However, they take a lot more to maintain and they also are a lot more expensive. The one that we use, which I'm sure most people here will have, those that do have them, are more passive filtered gas detectors. And that's where you just have a sensor with a filter in front of it that stops most of the crap getting in it. And it just reacts as the gas passes over the filter. So it takes a bit of time to react, but they are cheaper and a little bit more hard wearing. What was the gardening again? Missed that bit. It's a caving term. If we say I've just done a bit of gardening at the top of this shaft, it means there's maybe a couple of loose stones at the top and they've knocked them down. We don't want to be doing that in a mine. Also, because a lot of these mines as well, they're scheduled ancient monuments. Most mines across the UK now, save a few, are ancient monuments. You don't want to be disturbing them or messing with them. Leave them alone. Basically, think of another way to get down. If the top of the shaft is not ideal, maybe come up with some sort of traverse system that takes you out, and then you can go off at anchor points maybe further out on the shaft rather than right at the edge of where the level ends, something like that. I think that next question I've already answered. So yeah, we use the Q-Ray 2. We got them given actually. So because the team we've got some new gas detectors, better gas detectors now. The Upper Wharfedale team had no use for their gas detectors, and I put myself forward and said, it's because it means that we don't use them very often. However, I do use them, and myself and the other members of the Grassington Mines Appreciation Group, we do use them, and it means that when we do go, if we ever have cause to use them for real, you can call me in, and I've got experience of using them rather than being like somebody that may just turn it on for the first time. So that's why they gave them to us, for us to have a play with, and we use them very often, and we're very grateful to the team for that. Yeah, Mines Rescue Service only operating working mines. Yeah, so disused mines. Yeah, it's cave rescue organisations that will get called, or I should say as well. You have Comru in the Lake District. They are the Cumbrian Ore Mines Rescue Unit, but elsewhere, so up round like Ingleton, places like that, it would be the cave rescue organisation that would come and get you. Around Grassington or the lower areas of the Yorkshire Dales, it'd be the Upper Wharfedale, Swaledale and places like that. Their team would do that. So it's mainly cave rescue organisations that will do rescues in disused mines. I would have thought, but we all rely on each other, and we help each other out. CO was a deadly hazard working in the works coal with heatings. Yeah, so yeah, it's they are very, very dangerous places. So I think that's all the questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. A terrific speech. Very interesting. I am now very scared.
I hope I've not put people off too much. But I just wanted to show some of the dangers that you will see underground and what to look out for. But we still go down there. We're just very, very cautious.
Great. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Sam, enjoy your beer, and we'll hopefully see you on the moor one day. Not in your professional capacity, I would say. But anyway.
I hope not. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I'll log off now then. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you.